Welcome to Gen Z, the official podcast of Rame Contracting. Stay tuned while we explore the latest resources, thoughts, and trends in apprenticeship and workforce development for high school students. And now, here's your host, John Hayden.
Good afternoon, audience. I'd like to welcome everyone to our first podcast for Rame Contracting. I've got Wes Bradley with me, the Superintendent of Nelson County Schools. I'd like to introduce him and give him the floor, and he can kind of speak for himself. Wes?
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me on and being the first ever guest. My story, I grew up in Nelson County. My father was a Cooper, so a part of the bourbon world that is Nelson County. And I grew up and was an athlete, didn't take school as seriously as I should have. Ended up traveling a bit after high school and worked as a teacher in New York City. After I graduated from a small school in Minneapolis, St. Paul, joined Teach for America, and I was a New York City teaching fellow.
Where were you in New York?
I was in the Bronx. I lived in Manhattan, traveled to the Bronx every day, about 160 blocks north, and worked with students at the high school there for 6 years, and had really a lot of great experiences with kids. And New York City is such a unique place. It allows you to get a sense of who I was as somebody that grew up here in rural Kentucky, and also get a sense of the larger world that's out there. You know, New York City is a microcosm of the world.
I have a brother that's lived in New York City and Queens for 25 years.
Yeah, I was blessed by that experience. I was also able to meet some people in New York that took me to Chicago for a few years. I was in the South Side of Chicago. At the time, Chicago was in the process of taking public schools that were struggling and turning them into charter schools, making them smaller schools. We were part of that process in Chicago for a couple of years. And again, I was blessed to be around some really great leaders and some people that were passionate about rethinking school. From there, I had an opportunity to come back to Nelson County in 2011. Thomas Nelson High School opened, and was able to come back and had about 8 to 10 months to begin that process of opening Thomas Nelson. Nelson County High School at the time had about 1,500 kids, and that transition between Thomas Nelson and Nelson occurred over the course of 2 years, and is what it is today, where we have 2 high schools in Nelson County. Had some great experiences at Thomas Nelson and in the Nelson County community. Really continue to rethink school. Why do we exist as a entity in our community?
So you were the first principal at Thomas Nelson.
Yeah, so founding principal at Thomas Nelson in 2011, and transitioned last year. A year ago next Wednesday, moved into the superintendent role in Nelson County, and been very fortunate since then to be surrounded by great people, and to be able to have a lot of progress in the conversation. And I say conversation because I think in many ways the work we do as leaders is a conversation with whatever organization we're in. And in Nelson County Schools, that conversation has been focused around is what's the purpose of school. We reorganized the first week I was in the job. We reorganized the central office around 3 priorities. One of those was workforce development.
Right.
And hired Director of Workforce Development, Laura Arnold. We have workforce development coordinators at each high school now, and are really just beginning to scratch. I'd say we're doing a little more than scratching the surface in our heads. We know there's a long way to go, but that's what brings me here today. Is that conversation that we're having in Nelson, and the work you guys are doing with Rame Contracting around apprenticeships, and really what I would say, thinking about intelligently, how do we work with schools and other educational entities to streamline intelligence and bring out some of the best talent we have to work in our communities. So.
Well, and that when Rame Contracting began their apprentice program, one of the first schools that we got into was Thomas Nelson, and of which you were the principal at that point in time, which was the first time I ever met you, and the first arena that we were in was with the students that they brought in, and we interviewed them, and it was really unique for me to be able to get in that environment and to give you all kudos for Thomas Nelson. It is a very, very unique high school. It's very different than a lot of high schools that you go in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the work going on around this area, this region, we're fortunate to have a lot of great high schools. And I think that the superintendents around this area, the principals around this area, Marion, Taylor, Washington, Bardstown, Nelson County, the superintendents get it. And I think that the timing of your all's work with RAM has been a very, I think, an inspiring token for the school system to believe that our work is not going to fall on deaf ears. So you guys have really been a pioneer in that conversation. We're fortunate that you're leading that way.
Well, and it's been a huge success for us, and the apprentice program for us came and derived from the lack of workforce that we have in the construction industry. I say that we have that lack of workforce in the construction industry, but it's in industry in total. It doesn't matter who you speak with today in business, that the common denominator that we all have in business right now is lack of workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Rame Contracting derived of reaching into the younger generation and bringing them into our industry and basically training them up to do the work that we do. So we would like to welcome him into our podcast, and we've already touched on the subject a couple of times with this career work-ready environment through the high schools. What does that mean to Nelson County? What does career work-ready mean?
You go back to the question, why do we exist as a school district? What's the purpose of school? That's a question that we've continued to look at. And it is not as a straight. It's not a straight line to career and workforce. We recognize that there are multiple facets to life. But when we think about career and work readiness, we're looking at really an emotional component, as well as an academic component, the way kids interact with the world, and also the way that they interact with the information of that world. So career and work ready to us right now, our conversation is really about how kids have a sense of self-awareness, they have a sense of identity, they have a sense of purpose, and that purpose is continuously something that they're thinking about how they interact with the world around them. So let's take Rame Contracting, for example. I think, someone is not necessarily growing up and saying, my purpose is to do, let's say, drilling or whatever it is, excavating. But their purpose is to be, in many ways, a part of the team, to be a part of a deeper organizational structure that's about creating something for their community. It's about giving back. It's about being a part of this sense of, let's say, responsibility. Whatever it is, it's something that we need. We know, and I think that's this conversation around leadership. 75, 50, 60, 70 years ago, when we're coming in and thinking about jobs, and I can't speak to this, I'm not.
You're not that I was.
Right, these are only the assumptions I work from. When we were coming in to think about some of the work we did, it wasn't necessarily as purpose-driven because people were more satisfied with the opportunity to work.
There's
any form of work. Now we have this buffet opportunity where people have multiple options, not just in the choices of work, but also in the choices of their day-to-day life, the way they interact with the world through their smartphones, the way they interact with, let's say it's job shopping or playing, or just the way they, instead it used to be, well, we're going to go down to our Aunt Susie's house. Now they're texting 3 friends and 2 cousins and an uncle to figure out where they really want to go. It's like, okay, let's figure out, and it's a whole different world. The buffet options change things, but I think it really comes back to this conversation around purpose. And how can we as leaders help people, regardless of the job, help them think about their purpose in that role, think about their larger purpose outside of that role as an organization and as a community.
Yeah, because the purpose is not the same for all of them. You've got you've got the kids that are ready for college, and then you've got the kids that not for sure if they want to enter college or if they want to go to work, and then you've got the kids that want to go to work and are battling with their parents as to whether they should go to work or go to college.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing more of when we visit the high schools.
Yeah.
is that we've got this mixture, and that's where I think we at Rame Contracting can come involved in introducing. Our industry is not something that's just out there to the public. It needs to be introduced. It needs to be shown. And what we're finding is that the more we show this, the more a kid lights up with the opportunities that they don't necessarily have to go to a factory. That's not their only option. Not that there's anything wrong with going to a factory by any means, but we're introducing more choices.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing that these kids need is more choices. As you know, college is extremely expensive. And to go to college and spend a bunch of money on to try to find out what your options are in life is a very enlightening thing when you decide that I don't want to stay in college and now I have $40,000 worth of debt.
Right.
In lieu of like our apprentice program, which allows you to go figure out some things while you're getting paid, and then figure out that maybe this is a good career choice.
So our belief is that one of the functions of school is to serve as a conduit to the workforce in a literal sense. So we believe that every student before graduating in Nelson County schools should experience work with a community partner, with an organization, in this case with an industry such as yourself. And that's where we're allocating resources. I would say that in order to achieve that goal, the wraparound services that we offer at our schools, in the way we think about the nature of instruction, counseling, and all these other variables that contribute to it, have to come into play to make that occur in a healthy sense. We can place kids in work, in jobs, but it doesn't mean it's going to mean anything. So all the work that goes into making that right is going to take us time and energy. So our goal, though, we believe that a student is going to be more reflective on their purpose, on their sense of self, have stronger relationships with others by getting beyond the walls of the school and experiencing work.
And how do we get, because from what I can tell in our involvement is how do we get more industry and education calamity going on so that the education side has really jumped on board.
Yeah.
We have seen that. We're dealing with 6 different school districts right now, and every school district that we deal in is really on board. But I'm not seeing the industry side with the same involvement and the same intentions. Now they'll show up at the meetings.
Right.
They'll check the boxes, but they don't seem to want to take the next step to actually get kids involved and get education truly involved. How do we get them? How does Nelson County feel like what can they do as educators to really get the industry to buy in?
Well, as you know, that conversation is one that hasn't started until the last few years in I think in a meaningful sense. I would also say, what story have we told workforce about schools for the last 50? We've told them, I'm sorry, you can't come in. So it takes time to build trust. It takes time to build a storyline that matters to them.
No, you're correct.
And you guys, you came to that in a sense on your own, but there was a part of your purpose and your sense of identity as an organization that led you there. And that's something that I think we're going to have to tell a story as a community and as schools leading that conversation that is compelling, because people are not going to just flick a switch overnight and say,
no.
Yeah, rah, rah. So part of that in Nelson County right now is our stories around IHeartNC. And our argument is we love Nelson County, and part of that is saying by partnering with us, you're contributing to this larger story around individual wholeness and collective wholeness.
Right.
And while IHeartNC doesn't say it like that, that's essentially this idea that by contributing to this young man, it's also going to contribute to your young man or woman to your organization.
So what are you seeing out of? I realize that you as the superintendent are touching your administrative folks pretty much on a daily basis. But what are you seeing down lower in the ranks of the teachers and the other folks?
Yeah.
Are they as bought into this work ready, career ready environment as per se the administration?
So we've taken 2 steps this year. One, we have about 10% of our teachers that did the teacher externship process, which is in many ways a symbol of rethinking school. So there's a diverse group of teachers all the way from K-12 in that model. Next year there'll be 30 more, so we'll be at 20%. But we're also investing in this conversation as a district around deep learning. And I'd say schools are further along in that conversation. Some schools are further along in that conversation than others. But our focus is on the central question: what is the purpose of school? And as we dive into that question in the next year, I see lots of progress. We've laid the foundation for that conversation this year, and we've started to, what Jim Collins would refer to as shoot bullets.
Yeah.
And we've started to do the teacher externship. We've started to invest in what people around the country, around the world are calling deep learning, which would be more suited to preparing kids to the workforce. And I think the reality is it's much like industry. The conversation in some organizations is really far along, and in others it's still back in 1997.
No, you're correct.
And same in some of our schools and some of our classrooms. So I'd say that we as a district have the resources to make it happen. It's just all about continuing to guide and focus that conversation. Same as, whereas in industry, you don't necessarily have that natural occurring force where you have all these people that are part of the same thing.
No, but you do even at Rame Contracting. When I first brought this concept to my team, it wasn't embraced.
Right.
Quite frankly, it was looked at me like, "Are you crazy?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to hire a bunch of 18-year-olds and train them how to do our work." And so this initial thought process evolved over 6 or 8 months, and it was quite magical to watch our team begin to buy in one at a time. And the way I would know this was we would be in a meeting and they would start throwing out suggestions on how this would work or how that would work. And that's one of the things at Rame that we really take a lot of pride in is our team and our participation from our entire team, because we find huge success when we're all one and we're all going together is to achieve what we're trying to achieve. Now, one thing that we have noticed from the education side, that from our perspective that we would like to see is that the counselor side.
Yeah.
When we are fooling with a school, not a school district as much as a particular school that has a dedicated career-ready counselor, we're finding way more success.
Yeah.
Because they know the students. They know the student that needs to be going to work and not needing to be going to college. Yeah. And I know this is a budget issue for mostly it's a budget issue for the school districts.
Well, I think it's anything issue, just like at Rame. If you want to allocate resources to achieve a goal, then you allocate resources to achieve the goal. And I think it goes back to, we've constructed school as a traditional model to prepare kids to go to college. And within that, it's been 90% of the personnel are allocated directly towards academic attainment, which comes in the form of state requirements, which the state has continued to massage a little bit, but you look at the core classes of science, history, English, math, and some other a few other layers. That's what schools have been. And within that, I think that's where they allocate the resources have been allocated. They haven't been allocated towards supporting kids in this conversation. So I think there's a couple layers. One is there has to be leadership that's thinking, how do we have this conversation as a part of the entire school curriculum, not just as in these pockets. Come over to the counselor and talk about this. It can't be come over here and talk about this conversation. No. It has to be a coherent model that really comes all the way, I would argue, K-12, especially 6-12, where kids are thinking about these questions early on. By the time they get to their sophomore, junior year, they really already have a pretty good idea of their choices, and they're thinking critically with their families, with their mentors about where they're going to be spending their time in an apprenticeship, in a co-op, whatever it may be.
Well, and you brought up the state, and even in our apprenticeship portion of what we do, we have found, and I'm not really much on promoting the state, but I have to give them kudos. They have really been embracing these apprenticeships, and I think they've even been embracing it on the education side to give you all flexibility to do some things that are highly unusual, especially when you start to look at this over the last 20 years. We're doing things in schools that were just unheard of 5 years ago.
No question. And they've changed graduation requirements for the incoming class, freshmen. That really gives students a little more choice. Also, there's a conversation that continues to evolve around performance-based credits, which would apply to many of these work-based learning experiences. And that has to be, that flexibility has to be in place for students to attain the high school credit, while also allowing them to do what we would argue is going to be an exponentially more powerful experience. One of the beauties of work-based learning for me is, we in school we have a tendency to create a system that is in many ways an agreement, sometimes a very formal agreement. It's a bartering system. I ask you to do this, you do it, we give you a grade. When you're working, we could argue that same system exists for financial reasons. But in reality, those relationships are built around an organized construct, a team of people, a mentorship process that's bigger than some of the things that naturally occur in a school. At the same time, schools do create a lot of opportunities for natural mentorships in classrooms. Obviously, teachers have very strong relationships with students, but I would say that those job opportunities provide such a small environment for that mentorship experience and that trust to be built with someone that is going to be a little more, I think, long-term. They're looking out for each other. Think about this. I'm a kid. I'm in a classroom with 25 other kids. The relationship with that teacher is going to be a little bit minimized by the scale. That teacher has 150 kids or 145 kids a day. In the job workforce, the mentor, whoever this is doing the work with them, they may have one or two people that they're training.
No, you were correct about that.
That's a whole different scale. And there's also just the authentic nature of work. If it's, especially in a place like Rame, is going to give a kid such a sense of confidence in their ability to solve problems, work together.
And it's funny you bring that up because the two apprentices that we have working for us currently right now, one works directly with a mentor every day, and the relationship that they have built is phenomenal. And what that young man is learning is unbelievable. And then the other young man, he has probably more in the range of 4 to 5 different mentors on the operating equipment side. But the success that these two young men are having from those relationships and from the camaraderie that he's getting back from our team is phenomenal, and it's making these 18-year-olds shine.
It's making your team think about their purpose too.
Exactly.
And it's growing, and it's allowing them.
They have. We've got folks that are in their 50s that are embracing these 18-year-olds and mentoring them and teaching them their trade, and these guys are just eating it up. They're loving it. Both sides of the equation. The 18-year-olds loving it, and the 50-year-olds loving it.
Right.
Which has been really enlightening for me because I really believed that would be the biggest struggle that we would have had. Now, part of that has been from the two gentlemen that we have are phenomenal kids. They're really good people. So it's all got to be about the right people, the right fit.
Yeah.
We had one gentleman that left us, and last year we chose 3, and one ended up leaving, which we actually looked at as a success because we're trying these people out to see if they want this industry. Well, one chose that he didn't want the industry. So he chose to go back to school, which we felt was a huge win for the program. Because he chose to endeavor another line of work, which is what we were wanting. We don't want to spend money training somebody that doesn't want to end up in our industry.
So this is something that we've probably the last 6-8 weeks we've had conversations around workforce development and purpose of school. It speaks to what you said, and I think it goes both ways. Schools, we as entities, as boards of education, can't be so arrogant to think that we can serve our kids' needs within the walls of our buildings, especially all kids' needs. Right? We know that to what we're saying, excavate their gifts. If we do that in cooperation with our community through work-based learning experiences, we're gonna raise the ceiling. We're gonna raise the roof. We're gonna totally increase our opportunities for kids. And I'd say the same way with industry. Industry can't be arrogant enough to think that they can do it alone.
No, they can't do it alone.
So it goes both ways. We as educators can't be arrogant enough to think we can solve all your problems and take care of you and prepare you for the world in 13 years, but you can't leave these walls. Right? We know that's a bad model.
Right.
It defeats common sense. So
because there are I keep calling them kids, and I correct myself all the time. They're young adults is what they are, and they need the freedom to do what they want to do. Where we find our biggest success at industry is that when we get a person that loves doing what they're doing. We're all that way. You know, if you don't love what you're doing, you're really gonna struggle to be passionate about it and really good at it. Mm-hmm. So when we take these young people and we put them in an environment they want to be in, and we give them these opportunities to grow and prosper, they can do it. They're very, very capable of doing that. Which leads us to our next subject, which is leadership, culture, and workforce. And I'd like to attack these in 3 different levels, if you don't mind. I'd like to start out with culture, because our culture at Rame Contracting, we purposely changed our culture about 3 years ago, and we went through a lot of work, and we've accomplished that. So how do you feel Nelson County School District's culture is? And
so Nelson County, we've our story this year has really been about this idea of Nelson County pride, which goes along with this IRNC. And I think schools, by nature, they're in different buildings, and they have a unique culture that evolves from within. And I feel like our culture in Nelson County is continuing to grow under this idea that together we can do anything. So our conversation around impossible this year has really been around together we're brilliant. Together we can solve these challenges of the future. And that's our driving cultural story. And I think our core value construct is built around people. Put people first is our first core value. And that's a conversation that we know it's not just about caretaking, it's about expectations for people. It's about the right people. It's about ensuring that we understand the emotional component of the work, and that it is about together putting people at the table to make things happen. That's really our second core value, is the reimagined possibilities. It's the image is people sitting at a table together. And those 2 pieces really allow all the other things to happen. I think, culture is unique. What you think is your culture in the beginning and how you define it deepens so much over the course of time. Not only in your understanding as a leader, your awareness as a leader of what you think you mean, but also your teams mean, and the stories that come from that, and how you articulate that over time. It evolves. So we're really in our infancy. In many ways, we're in our first year. I'm in my first year, and we're really in our first year as a district with the conversation that is.
Right.
It's the first time the Nelson County Schools has had a district value construct to be able to have this conversation. So we're really in our infancy.
And Rame Contracting created a mission statement 4 years ago as we began to try to evolve and change our culture. And just here recently, as little as 3 months ago, I realized that our culture had changed so much that our mission had actually changed.
Yeah, I think that's healthy.
And we brought our team back together, And we rewrote our mission statement to be what we are today. And what we are today is a company about people, period. It's that simple. We're about our people, and we want our people to grow, prosper, and participate.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. We had 18 people in this room revisiting our mission statement, and not a person in that room was doing the job they were hired to do.
Mm-hmm.
They had grown that much in that period of time, which then allowed us to change our mission. And our mission today is about our people. Mm-hmm. And we're finding huge success with this. And you're right, and you said it a minute ago. It's all about hiring the right people.
And we talk a lot about purpose-driven people that are in it, especially in education. Education is not profit-driven. So, let's say you do a great job, you're not going to get more money next year.
Right. So
you have to be very purpose-driven around the work we do. And so our purpose right now, our conversation on purpose as a district, and is around, so the term we're using is excavating gifts. So we believe every person, so think about this, John. Every kid comes to school. They have to come to school. It's compulsory. If they don't come to school, their parents can go to court. Right? So we're telling you, you got to come to school. If you don't, it's illegal. And then when you come to school, we're going to rank and sort you and tell you, you get this grade, you get that grade. Okay, you got a 72 in math. I'm sorry, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. That's in some ways the way the traditional model of schooling worked. We know that every school looks a little different how they approach that, and some of them do it more in a more joyful, humane way than others. But we, as an educational world, it's like kids have to come to school. That changes things. They don't have a choice.
Right.
So our purpose is to excavate the gifts of every kid that walks through our door, for them to be able to have an awareness of who they are and what their gifts are, to be able to talk about that and be able to interact in the world confidently. So this gift conversation is also how we're looking at this conversation with community. Our argument is that places like Rame and other places across our community have certain gifts to offer our kids. And we believe that by uniting those gifts of our community with our kids, that's where the magic can really happen. That's where we would say impossible stuff comes to life, stuff that we can't achieve alone in our buildings. So I think that our purpose has really been shaped around this idea that school is compulsory. You have to be here. Therefore, our job, that shapes the way we think about it. We believe every person's gifted. We also believe that our teachers and our bus drivers and our custodians, they're gifted, and part of that is allowing them the space and opportunity for their gifts to emerge and contribute to the conversation.
So how are you finding yourself as the leader, finding ways to direct this and lead this? Because what you're talking about is not an overnight fix.
Right.
This is a long-term.
Yeah. So we've had Nelson County Pride teams, and there's 5 teams of people. We meet once a month, and each of them is focused on one of our core values. And what we've been doing, and we're really ready to put on paper, in a sense, the construct for next year is we're saying, what does it mean to put people first in our schools? What's that look like from the sense of a student's experience? What's it look like to collaborate and reimagine possibility from a student's experience? So we are looking at each of our core values. So our 3rd core value is innovate and grow. 4th core value is dedicated to our community. And the 5th, energize the world, which is really about communication and celebration and on the fun stuff that we know comes along with interacting with each other. So we've had teams built around those, and those teams have been continue to give feedback over a 5-month process. And that's energizing this conversation. It's all about communication and creating a small enough conversation where people understand it, but a big enough conversation where it compels a very long-term purpose.
But are you finding yourself having to drag people into this participation?
No,
are people embracing this?
So we're a big organization. We have about 600 employees. Of that 600, about 350 are teachers. And then the other 250 are really a mix of unique positions, whether they're instructional aides or bus drivers or facilities and different roles that people play in a school district our size. So I found really when you start with this conversation around gifts, we are gifted. And what I'd say to a parent in this conversation, we say every kid in our district is gifted, and they say, really, all kids? We say, show me a kid that isn't gifted. Find me one kid here that's not gifted. And they say, but my kid isn't really gifted. And we'll say, you're right. They are. We agree with you. Just like that kid there is really gifted. We just have to create the context for that to emerge over the course of time. And we have to tell a story to them and to ourselves that allows that to become a reality. So that's a big part of our conversation. We've not had really any experiences. I've not had any experiences this year around pushback around that conversation. I think where the challenge comes is, okay, if we're saying that every kid's gifted, and as we move into this conversation, how do our classrooms honor that? And how do we build curriculum and experiences for kids that honor that reality?
Yeah, how do you get the classroom to embrace this gift?
So that's where I would say we're building a model and a conversation, and I think many teachers that are deep in this conversation and the Pride teams are doing a lot of this work. Other teachers are doing it indirectly and aren't aware of it. And then there's other teachers that maybe not haven't even heard of the conversation other than when I'm sending out my monthly communication. So we're still very small.
Right.
We're still very small. It's going to take us really 3 to 4 years before I think it is a well distributed piece that is shared by, I'd say, everyone in our district. I'd say next year we're going to have a lot of movement because we've stabilized the conversation. People are listening, but we haven't really begun to apply widespread. And we really see next year as an incubator for that in many of our classrooms.
Well, you're in the same situation as we are or were 2 years ago when we began our apprentice program. It was Greek. It was not received, because it was different, a way of doing business than what we had been doing. So what we have found over the last couple of years that the more we talk about it and the more we put it out there and the more we admit that doesn't work right and we make those changes, the more that people embrace, and then we see the two gentlemen working for us that are finding huge success.
Yeah.
When we first introduced this, we committed to each other that we were going to invest in this for 5 years. Because I felt like it was going to take 5 years for us to get through our mistakes, correct those mistakes, and really we're going to find our hugest success when we can take a group of apprentices that are now out there producing in the world and go back to relatively the same age people in the schools, close, and they can promote and tell other people that this can be a hugely successful industry through this process. And that, over the last couple of years, we've made our mistakes and we have corrected them and we're finding huge success, and which has actually had to change my leadership role tremendously, especially from when I started our own business in '92. I mean, the differences between managing a business in '92 to 2019 is humongous. I mean, it's really enormous in the size of changes that we've been through, not only with our industry and technology and government regulations. There's so many different things that are so much different. But I'm finding huge success for myself in a new way to lead and manage people. And it's amazing what you can do with people when you put them in positions to prosper and grow.
One of our priorities, so we had the values, we also have three core priorities this year. And one of those was shared leadership. And I think when you work from the assumption that everyone on your team is a leader in some shape or form, it forces you to question how we're organized, forces you to question job descriptions, forces you to question what do we really mean by that title, forces you to question how we think about this mentorship and this growth process. And I think, so our commitment also is that every member of our team, every employee is having growth conversations. And we've asked every principal in our district to meet with their teachers one-on-one, at least monthly.
Yeah.
Because the value there is what we're finding a lot. Principals are really having rich conversations about these things. And that's something that if you're invested in someone, you can't spend if you're 30 to 45 minutes a month with that person one-on-one, it probably means that you really don't mean it.
Are your teachers finding comfort in participation?
So again, the feedback I'm getting is that I think it gives them a shared sense of leadership.
Correct.
It gives them a shared purpose. The best way to not grow is to be left alone and siloed off for years, and that goes for any of us. When you isolate yourself, the chances of you growing decrease drastically. Or if you have a team member, you're like, you know what, it's not going well. You isolate that person off because you don't know exactly how to handle them. They're only going to get worse in most cases.
Yes.
So
Absolutely. Well, we've had some good conversation here this afternoon. I'm going to give you a minute, if you like, to speak to your Nelson County clan and give them a overview vision of where Nelson County's headed.
I appreciate it. So again, very, very grateful for the opportunity here today with John and the team and Rame. But in Nelson County, as we look towards the future, this conversation around workforce is going to continue to challenge us to think, why do we exist as an organization? What's the role that we play as educators in thinking about how students can interact successfully in the world? The Pride teamwork is coming to fruition and will be something that we'll be sharing broadly over the next year. And as I say to you, thank you for your leadership.
I'm glad you came.
Thank you as anyone that's listening for your contributions to this ongoing conversation that really comes back to this idea of community and what is a community. So thank you guys.
We appreciate our audience today, and we look forward to doing this again. Thank you.
You have been listening to Gen Z, the official podcast of Rame Contracting from Springfield, Kentucky. Your host has been John Hayden. Thank you for listening, and we will join each other again soon.